My husband came home to find 2 cops in my living room and me holding his spare toupee. "Please tell me they didn't," he whispered. "Didn't what?" I held up the box. "Didn't leave a recording of you planning my fatal car accident? Didn't include evidence that you drowned your first wife for insurance money? Didn't gift wrap your secret hairpiece and leave it on my doorstep with a warning note from my parents?" He straightened his cuffs. "That thing he does. Annie. Whatever you heard." "Whatever I heard." I laughed. It wasn't a pretty sound. "I heard you tell Vanessa that my brake lines should fail on County Road 7. I heard you say the life insurance pays double for accidental death. I heard you call me the last loose end." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The taller cop shifted his weight. "Sir, we're going to need you to. This is a misunderstanding." Jason found his voice, smooth as butter on a hot biscuit. "My wife has been under tremendous stress. The veterinary practice, her parents' health issues. She's not thinking clearly." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. "Make it look like she drove off the road. That curve near the old mill, nobody survives that curve." His voice. Unmistakable. "I sound pretty clear to me," I said. One of the cops put a hand on Jason's shoulder. He flinched like he'd been burned. "You planted this," he spat. "You and your insane parents." "My insane parents." I stepped closer, still holding that ridiculous toupee. "The retired sheriff and the woman who cracked Soviet codes for army intelligence. Those insane parents. The ones who've been building a case against you for 7 years while you thought you were the smartest man in every room." I dropped the toupee at his feet. "They also said to tell you, the FBI already interviewed Vanessa at the bank an hour ago. She's singing like the church choir." The color drained from his face. Then the rage came, ugly and sudden, twisting his handsome features into something feral. "You stupid bitch. You think this is over? You think you've won?" He lunged forward, handcuffs be damned, and the cop slammed him against the wall so hard the picture frames rattled. "I'll be out by morning. And when I am, you'll wish your precious parents never. Enjoy county jail, Jason." I picked up the box, the warning note still taped to the lid. My mother's handwriting. Neat. Precise. "To cause trouble. Best gift they ever gave me." The cops dragged him out. He kept shouting, something about lawyers, something about how I'd regret this. The words bounced off me like hail on a tin roof. I'd spent 6 years married to that man. 6 years of diminishing myself, of apologizing for my own existence, of watching my savings disappear into his business ventures while he straightened his cufflinks and told me I was imagining things. The front door slammed. The silence rushed in. I stood in the middle of my living room, still holding that box. My hands were shaking now. Now that he was gone. Now that the performance was over. The taller cop came back inside. Officer Martinez, according to his badge. He had the kind of face that had seen too many domestic calls and not enough happy endings. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come down to the station. Give a formal statement. Give me 5 minutes." He nodded. "I'll wait outside." Alone. The word landed differently than it had an hour ago. An hour ago I was married to a murderer. Now I was just a woman in an empty house with a box full of horrors and a husband's spare hairpiece on the floor. I picked up the toupee. It was absurd. Genuinely absurd. Dark brown with silver threads at the temples, the kind of thing a man buys when he can't admit he's aging. Jason wore it every day for 3 years and never once acknowledged it existed. Not a single joke. Not a single mention. I was married to a man who refused to admit he was bald while actively planning to kill me. I started laughing. Not the bitter laugh from before. This was something else. Something unhinged and freeing. I laughed until tears ran down my cheeks, until my ribs ached, until I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling over. The box slipped from my hands and more evidence spilled across the floor. Photographs. Bank statements. A flash drive with a red label that said "Open me first." I stopped laughing. The flash drive was cold in my palm. I plugged it into my laptop and clicked the single file it contained. A video. My mother, sitting at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee beside her and Dad visible over her shoulder, cleaning a shotgun. "Annie," she said. "If you're watching this, you finally opened the box. Good. We were starting to think you'd never get curious about why we gift-wrapped evidence of a double homicide." Dad looked up from his gun. "Took you long enough, kiddo." Mom swatted his arm. "Hush. Let me talk." She turned back to the camera. "We found the first wife's case file 3 years ago. Cold case, wrongfully closed. Your father never forgave himself for missing the signs. When Jason started talking about life insurance policies last spring, I made some calls. Called in some favors. The kind of favors you earn when you spend 30 years in military intelligence and your husband spends 40 years in law enforcement." 42 years, Dad corrected. "Nobody likes a braggart, Harold." I pressed my hand to my mouth. They'd known. For 3 years, they'd known. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, every time Jason kissed my cheek and called me his better half, they sat across the table from him and they knew. And they said nothing. Because they were building a case. Because they needed him confident and careless. Because if they'd told me, I would have confronted him, and he would have run, and a dead woman would never get justice. Mom leaned closer to the camera. "There's more, sweetheart. More than what's in the box. But you need to come to us. We're at the lake house. Come alone. Don't tell the police everything yet. Trust us one more time." The video ended. I stared at the frozen image of my mother's face. She looked tired. She looked like she'd been carrying a boulder for 3 years and had finally set it down. I grabbed my keys. The squad car was still idling in my driveway. Officer Martinez straightened up when I walked out, my purse slung over one shoulder and the box tucked under my arm. "I need to make a stop first," I said. "Before the station." "Ma'am, procedure requires." "Officer Martinez." I looked him dead in the eyes. "My parents just gift-wrapped a murder confession and left it on my porch like a Christmas present. They're at their lake house with what my mother describes as more. I'm going there. You can follow me if you want." He considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll follow you." The lake house was 40 minutes north, tucked into a curve of Stillwater Lake where the pine trees grew thick and the neighbors minded their own business. Dad bought the place after he retired, said he needed somewhere quiet to clean his guns and think about the old cases that still haunted him. I never understood what he meant. Not until today. The gravel road crunched under my tires. The house came into view, smoke curling from the chimney, porch light already on even though it was barely past noon. Mom's garden was in full bloom, rows of tomatoes and peppers and herbs that she tended like grandchildren. I parked and sat in the car for a full minute. Officer Martinez pulled in behind me, his engine ticking as it cooled. "Want me to come in?" he asked through the window. "Give me 10 minutes. The front door opened before I reached it. Mom stood there in her gardening jeans, dirt still under her fingernails, and she looked at me the way she used to look at me when I fell off my bike or came home crying from a bad grade. Like she wanted to fix it. Like she'd already figured out how. "Hi, sweetheart." 3 years, I said. She nodded. 3 years. You let me live with him. Sleep next to him. You let me bring him to Christmas dinner and pass him the gravy while you knew. We did. Her voice didn't waver. And I'd do it again. Because the alternative was telling you and watching you confront him with nothing but accusations. He would have disappeared, Annie. He would have found another woman in another town, and Rachel's family would never get to bury her with the truth. Rachel. The first wife. I'd only seen her in photographs, a smiling blonde woman who died in a boating accident 7 years ago. Jason kept one picture of her on the mantelpiece. Said it was to honor her memory. I used to think that was sweet. I felt sick. Dad appeared behind Mom. He was holding a manila folder thick enough to be a novel. You watched the video? Every second. Then you know we've got him. He stepped aside, holding the door wider. Come inside. We've got more to show you. A lot more. And we've got a plan. The kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh bread. Mom poured me a cup without asking, added the exact amount of cream I liked, and set it in front of me. Dad spread the folder across the kitchen table. Photographs. Witness statements. Forensic reports. Newspaper clippings. This is Rachel's case file, Dad said. The real one. Not the one the county closed. His finger tapped a photograph of a boat. They ruled it accidental drowning. Said she hit her head on the boom and fell overboard. But look here. He pointed to a close-up of the boat's railing. Scrape marks. Fresh ones. Someone tied something to this railing. Something that dissolved in the water. Ice, Mom said flatly. He tied her to the railing with a rope made of ice. By the time the Coast Guard found the boat, the evidence had melted. Clever bastard. I stared at the photograph. How long have you known? 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, Dad said. A retired Coast Guard investigator contacted me. Said he'd never been satisfied with the ruling. Asked if I'd take a look. Once I did, I couldn't unsee it. And you didn't tell the police? I told one person. Deputy Bill. He's been helping us gather evidence off book. The department was compromised back then. Still might be. Jason has friends. Money. We couldn't risk it. Mom slid a photograph across the table. Vanessa. At a bank. With Jason. Her hand on his arm. His cufflinks catching the light. This was 18 months ago. That's when we knew he was targeting you. The life insurance policy, the new will, the accidental death clause. He was patient. Methodical. We had to be the same. I pushed the coffee away. My stomach couldn't handle it. The box, I said. Why now? Because he was moving, Dad said. We intercepted an email last week. He bought plane tickets for next Thursday. One way. To a country without an extradition treaty. You were supposed to have your accident on Wednesday. Wednesday. 6 days from now. We couldn't wait any longer, Mom said. So we gave you the box. We knew you'd open it. We knew you'd call the police. We knew he'd come home and incriminate himself. The only variable was you. Me. Whether you'd believe it. Whether you'd act. Whether 6 years of him breaking you down had broken you too much to fight back. I looked at my mother. Then at my father. Then at the folder full of horrors spread across their kitchen table like a Sunday puzzle. I called 911 before he got home. I know. Mom smiled, small and fierce. We were listening on the police scanner. Best sound I've heard in years. And I dropped his toupee at his feet in front of 2 officers. Dad barked out a laugh. Wish I'd seen that. He lunged at me. The cop slammed him into the wall. Even better. I picked up my coffee and drank it. The warmth spread through my chest, pushing back the cold that had settled there since I first opened that box. Okay, I said. What's the plan? Dad pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. First, we need to make sure Jason doesn't make bail. We've got enough for a holding charge, but the real case needs to be airtight. That's where Bill comes in. He's at the station right now, making sure the booking process is thorough and slow. Second, Mom said, we need Vanessa. She's the weak link. She's a follower, not a leader. If we can flip her, we can get testimony about Jason's plans, his confessions, maybe even details about Rachel's death that we don't have yet. Third, Dad continued, we go public. Fast. Before Jason's lawyers can spin this. Small town, big news. We need the gossip chain working in our favor. By sundown, I want every church lady, every diner regular, and every VFW member to know that Jason tried to kill Annie and got caught. I stared at them. You've really thought about this? We've been thinking about this for 3 years, Mom said. This isn't a reaction. This is an operation. For the first time since I opened that box, I felt something other than shock or rage or grief. I felt safe. Not because the danger was over. Because I wasn't facing it alone. Okay, I said again. Let's do this. Deputy Bill arrived 20 minutes later. He was a tall man with a quiet face and a habit of pausing 2 seconds before he answered any direct question. I'd known him my whole life. He used to bring me candy when Dad worked late shifts. I never thought much about him beyond that. Now I realized he'd been one of the people protecting me for 3 years. Annie, he said, pausing. 2 seconds. Glad you're okay. Bill. I paused too, mirroring him. Thanks for helping my parents. He nodded once. Then he turned to Dad. Jason's in holding. Arraignment is tomorrow morning. The DA wants to talk to Annie tonight. The DA? Already? Small town. Big news. Word travels. Bill almost smiled. Also, his secretary goes to our church. She heard the scanner traffic and called half the congregation before lunch. Mom looked satisfied. Good. The faster this spreads, the harder it is for Jason's people to control the narrative. I thought about Jason in a holding cell. I thought about his cufflinks, probably confiscated with his belt and shoelaces. I thought about him trying to straighten cuffs that weren't there. The image made me smile. We spent the next 2 hours going through the evidence. Every photograph. Every statement. Every carefully documented piece of a case that should have been solved 7 years ago. By the end of it, I knew more about Rachel's death than I knew about my own marriage. She was 26. A kindergarten teacher. She loved dogs and old movies and had a laugh that people described as infectious. She met Jason at a charity gala. Married him 6 months later. Died on their first anniversary. The boat was his anniversary gift to her. A week later, it was a crime scene. Her parents, I said. Do they know? Dad's face tightened. They know we've been investigating. They don't know we've solved it. Not yet. I want to tell them. Annie. It should come from me. Another wife who almost died. They need to hear it from someone who understands. Mom and Dad exchanged a look. Then Mom nodded. We'll arrange it. After the arraignment. The arraignment. I kept forgetting that was tomorrow. That I'd have to see him again. That he'd be standing in a courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, probably without his toupee, and I'd have to look at him and not fall apart. I twisted my wedding ring. The motion was automatic, a nervous habit I'd developed somewhere around year 3 of the marriage. The ring was loose now. I'd lost weight this past year. Stress, probably. Or maybe my body knew something my mind couldn't admit. I pulled the ring off and set it on the kitchen table. Mom noticed. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand over mine and squeezed. The drive to the police station felt longer than the drive to the lake house. Officer Martinez followed me again, but this time I wasn't thinking about the box or the evidence or even Jason. I was thinking about Rachel. About the smile in her photographs. About the fact that she'd been dead for 7 years and I'd been sleeping next to her killer. The station was small, the kind of small-town police department where the coffee was always burnt and the dispatcher knew everyone's names. A woman at the front desk directed me to a conference room where a man in a suit was waiting. District Attorney Michael Chin. I'd seen him at community events, shaking hands and kissing babies. He had a reputation for being tough but fair. "Mrs. Holloway," he said. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "So do I." "Sit down. Let's talk about what happens next." I sat. I told him everything. The box. The recording. The flash drive. The evidence my parents had gathered. Rachel's case file. The boat. The ice rope. The plane tickets to a non-extradition country. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Your parents have been busy. They've had 3 years. So I gathered." He tapped his pen against his notepad. "The recording is strong evidence. The physical evidence from Rachel's case is stronger. But I need you to understand something. Defense attorneys are going to come after you hard. They're going to question your credibility, your mental state, your motives. They're going to try to make this about a bitter wife getting revenge on a cheating husband. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning to kill me." "I know. But can you handle being cross-examined about every mistake you've ever made, every argument you've ever had, every moment of your marriage that can be twisted to make you look unstable?" I thought about the last 6 years. The arguments. The gaslighting. The times I'd apologized for things that weren't my fault. The times I'd cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't see. "I've survived worse," I said. DHN nodded slowly. "I believe you." The rest of the meeting was logistics. The arraignment time. The charges. The likely bail amount. The protection order. By the time I left the station, it was dark outside and I was running on coffee and adrenaline and a strange, buzzing energy that I didn't recognize. Officer Martinez was waiting by my car. "Need a ride home?" "I can drive." "You sure? It's been a long day." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a steady presence. He'd been patient all day. He didn't have to follow me to the lake house. He didn't have to wait. "Why are you being so nice to me?" I asked. "Because my sister married a man like Jason Holloway." He said it simply, without drama. "She didn't make it out." "You did. That matters to me." I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. He nodded back. "I'll follow you home. Make sure you get in safe." The house was empty when I got there. Empty and quiet and somehow smaller than it had been this morning. The toupee was still on the floor where I dropped it. The box was still on the coffee table. The warning note was still taped to the lid. To cause trouble. I picked up the note. My mother's handwriting. Neat and precise and completely unapologetic. I taped it to the refrigerator. A reminder. A trophy. Whatever. Then I made myself a sandwich. Because I hadn't eaten all day and my body was starting to protest. I ate standing at the kitchen counter, staring at the crack in the floor tile that I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Jason always said he'd take care of it. Jason said a lot of things. Tomorrow, I'd fix the tile myself. Tomorrow, I'd face him in court. Tonight, I was going to sleep in my own bed for the first time in 6 years without a murderer beside me. I woke at dawn to the sound of my phone buzzing. Text messages. Dozens of them. Word had spread. The church gossip chain. The diner regulars. The VFW members. Everyone in town knew that Jason Holloway had been arrested for trying to kill his wife. Some messages were supportive. Some were horrified. Some were the kind of morbid curiosity that small towns specialize in. One message was from a number I didn't recognize. "You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over." I stared at the screen. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. I typed back, "See you in court." Then I got dressed for the arraignment. I wore red. Because Rachel's favorite color was red. Because I wanted Jason to see it. Because some things are worth making a statement about. The courthouse was packed. Reporters. Neighbors. Strangers. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, Dad's arm around Mom's shoulders. Deputy Bill stood near the door, quiet and watchful. Jason was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. No cufflinks. No toupee. His bald head gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and I watched him scan the room with the desperate arrogance of a man who still thought he could talk his way out of anything. Then he saw me. Red dress. Straight back. Not crying. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been fear. The judge read the charges. Attempted murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. And because Dad's file had been thorough, first-degree murder in the death of Rachel Holloway. Jason's lawyer argued for bail. DHN argued against it. The judge listened, frowned, and set bail at $5 million. Jason couldn't make $5 million. All his money was tied up in accounts that were currently being frozen. The gavel came down. Jason was led away. As he passed, he looked at me one more time. "This isn't over," he hissed. I smiled. "Yes, it is." That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought tile grout. I came home, knelt on the kitchen floor, and fixed the crack. It took 3 hours. My knees hurt. My back ached. But when I was done, the floor was whole again. Not perfect. The new grout was a slightly different color than the old. Anyone looking closely would see the repair. But it was solid. It would hold. I sat on the floor and looked at that imperfect, beautiful crack. Then I picked up my phone and called Mom. "It's done," I said. "The floor. The arraignment. Everything. How do you feel?" I thought about it. Like I just set down something heavy. "Good. That's good. Now come over for dinner. Dad's grilling. We're having steak. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and looked around my kitchen. The warning note on the refrigerator. The empty box on the table. The fixed tile on the floor. Jason was in a cell. Vanessa was cooperating with the FBI. Rachel's parents would finally get the truth. And I was still standing. A little cracked. A little repaired. But standing. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. The text from the unknown number sat in my phone like a splinter. "You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over." I didn't delete it. I wanted the reminder. I wanted to remember that the snake still had fangs, even with its spine broken. The morning after the arraignment, I drove to the diner. Millie's. The kind of place where the coffee is bottomless and the gossip is free. I walked in and 30 conversations stopped at once. Then Marge, who'd been cutting my hair since I was 12, stood up and started clapping. It caught on. The whole diner. Clapping. For me. I stood there like an idiot, clutching my purse, trying not to cry. Not because I was sad. Because I'd spent 6 years believing I was invisible, and suddenly an entire diner full of people was proving me wrong. "Sit down, honey." Marge pulled out a chair. "Pancakes are on the house. I can pay." Did I stutter? I sat. The pancakes arrived. Blueberry. My favorite. I hadn't told anyone. Millie herself came out from behind the counter. She was 73 years old and had owned this diner for 40 of them. She put a hand on my shoulder. "We heard everything. About Rachel. About what your parents did. About the trial." She squeezed. "You eat those pancakes. Then you tell us what you need." What I needed. I'd spent so long not needing anything. Not asking. Not wanting. Jason had trained me like a dog. Sit. Stay. Don't make a scene. I need to know about Vanessa, I said. Where she is. What she's saying. A man in the corner booth cleared his throat. I recognized him. Gary, from the bank. He'd processed my mortgage application 3 years ago. He'd always seemed nervous around Jason. She's been suspended, he said quietly. The bank launched an internal investigation this morning. They found irregularities in 17 accounts. All connected to your husband. 17? She was siphoning money for years. Not just from you. From half the town. He looked down at his coffee. Including my mother's retirement account. The diner went quiet again. Not the clapping kind of quiet. The angry kind. Where is she now? I asked. Her house. Over on Maple Street. I saw her car in the driveway when I drove past. I pushed back from the table. Marge looked alarmed. Annie, you're not going there alone. I'm not going there alone. I pulled out my phone and called the one person who'd been waiting in the shadows for 3 years. Bill answered on the second ring. Paused 2 seconds. Annie. Want to take a drive to Maple Street? Pause. I'll meet you there. Vanessa's house was a neat little colonial with flower boxes and a welcome mat that said "Bless this home." I stood on that mat and felt the anger rise in my chest. This woman had sat across from me at church potlucks. She'd complimented my casserole. She'd asked about my day. And the whole time, she was planning my funeral. Bill pulled up behind me. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside me, solid and quiet, like he'd been standing beside my family for 3 years without anyone noticing. I knocked. The door opened a crack. Vanessa's face appeared, pale and pinched. Her long nails, usually immaculate, were chipped at the edges. She'd been biting them. What do you want? To talk. I have nothing to say to you. That's fine. I pushed the door open. She stumbled backward. I have plenty to say to you. Bill followed me inside. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. The living room was a disaster. Papers everywhere. An open laptop. A half-packed suitcase. She'd been planning to run. Let me guess, I said. Jason stopped answering your calls. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand. Explain it to me. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then something in her face cracked. Not guilt. Fear. He said he loved me. Her voice was small. He said he'd leave you. We were going to take the money and disappear. Costa Rica. He had a house picked out. A beach house. White sand. Blue water. She laughed, bitter and broken. I believed him. You're not the first woman to believe Jason Holloway. I stepped closer. But you might be the last. Rachel didn't get a chance to realize she'd been conned. I almost didn't either. But you, Vanessa. You're still breathing. You still have choices. What choices? The FBI interviewed me for 3 hours. My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. Everyone in town knows what I did. Then help me make it right. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. No tears. Just exhaustion. How? Testify. Tell the truth. Not just about the fraud. About the plans. About what he told you about Rachel. About everything. They'll send me to prison. Maybe. But you'll still be alive. And Jason will be somewhere he can't hurt anyone else. She was quiet. Her fingers tapped against her thigh. Tap tap tap. Those long nails, ruined now. He killed her, she whispered. Rachel. He told me. One night, he'd been drinking. He started bragging. Said the perfect murder wasn't about being smart. It was about being patient. About finding the right woman. The right circumstances. He said Rachel was the first. Then there was another one, before you. A woman in Ohio. A car accident. He collected $100,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. Another one? Her name was Diane. Diane Foster. He never told me her last name, but I looked her up. She died 5 years ago. Car went off a bridge. Jason was the beneficiary on her life insurance. Bill stepped forward. For the first time, he spoke. You have proof? Vanessa nodded. She walked to her laptop and opened a file. I kept records. Insurance policies. Bank statements. Copies of everything. I told myself it was for leverage. In case he ever tried to screw me over. She let out a hollow laugh. I guess he did. I stared at the screen. Diane Foster. Age 34. School teacher. Survived by a sister in Michigan. 3 women. Jason had killed 3 women. That I knew about. Vanessa. I waited until she looked at me. This is bigger than you and me now. This is about making sure he never hurts anyone again. Are you going to help us or not? She looked at her chipped nails. At the half-packed suitcase. At the life she'd built on lies and greed and the blood of other women. I'll testify, she said. Bill pulled out his phone. I'll call the DA. We spent the next 4 hours at Vanessa's kitchen table. She talked. We listened. Every detail of the plan to kill me. The brake lines. County Road 7. The life insurance policy for $2 million. Jason's instructions to make it look good and don't get greedy on the first payout. She told us about Diane. The car accident in Ohio. Jason had tampered with the brake lines on that car too. Same method. Different state. Different woman. Same monster. She told us about Jason's lawyer, a man named Clifford who specialized in making problems disappear. She told us about offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. She told us about a safety deposit box at a bank 2 towns over with physical evidence Jason had kept as trophies. Trophies? I felt sick. A necklace. A lock of hair. A wedding ring. He kept things from each of them. He called it his collection. I thought about my own wedding ring, still sitting on my parents' kitchen table. I'd taken it off and never put it back on. Where's the safety deposit box? Bill asked. First Federal Bank in Millbrook. Box 237. The key is in his office desk. Top drawer. False bottom. Bill made a note. We'll get a warrant. By the time we left, it was late afternoon. Vanessa sat on her couch, looking smaller than she'd ever looked at those church potlucks. I paused at the door. Thank you, I said. The words tasted strange in my mouth. Thanking the woman who'd helped plan my murder. She looked up. I didn't do it for you. I know. I walked out. Bill followed. We stood on her porch, the bless this home mat still under our feet. Diane Foster, I said. That's 3. At least 3. Bill paused. 2 seconds. I'll contact Ohio authorities. And the FBI. This is crossing state lines now. I want to talk to Diane's sister. And Rachel's parents. Before anyone else does. You don't have to do that yourself. Yes, I do. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. That night, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. You found the bank records. You're smarter than he said. I stared at the screen. This wasn't Jason. Jason was in jail. No phone access. This was someone else. I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots. Then nothing. Then a single word. Clifford. Jason's lawyer. The one Vanessa had mentioned. The one who made problems disappear. Another message, "We should talk." I called Bill. Then I called my parents. Then I called the DA. Nobody thought I should meet with Jason's lawyer alone. But nobody could stop me either. "He's baiting you," Dad said. "That's what lawyers do." "I know. You're going to meet him anyway." "I have to know what he knows." About Diane. About Rachel. About any others we haven't found yet. Dad was quiet. Then, "Take Bill. And wear a wire." The meeting was set for the next morning. A coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. Public place. Clifford picked it, which told me he didn't want any trouble either. Not yet. I walked in at 10 o'clock sharp. Bill sat 3 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper. The wire was taped under my shirt, uncomfortable and cold against my skin. Clifford was already there. He was older than I expected. 60-ish. Expensive suit. Perfect posture. The kind of man who smiled without showing teeth. "Mrs. Holloway. Thank you for coming. I'm not Mrs. Holloway anymore." "My apologies." "Ms. Parker, then." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please. Sit." I sat. "You said we should talk." "Talk." He stirred his coffee. 3 slow circles. "My client is in a difficult position. The evidence against him is substantial. But not insurmountable. Your client tried to kill me. He killed at least 2 other women. There's nothing insurmountable about that. Allegedly." He said the word like it was a fine wine. Allegedly killed. Allegedly tried. The prosecution has a recording, yes. Recordings can be challenged. Evidence can be suppressed. Witnesses can be discredited. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee cup. "You'd be surprised what a good lawyer can do." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check." He set down his cup. "My client is willing to plead guilty to lesser charges. Fraud. Embezzlement. He'd serve time, but not life. In exchange, he'd provide information about other matters that might interest federal authorities." Other matters. Financial crimes. Tax evasion. The kind of white-collar offenses that carry significant prison time on their own. I leaned back in my chair. The wire pressed against my ribs. "You want me to believe that Jason Holloway, who murdered 3 women, who kept trophies of his kills, who planned my death down to the brake lines on my car, you want me to believe he's suddenly feeling cooperative?" Clifford's smile flickered. "Just for a second. I want you to believe that trials are expensive, lengthy, and uncertain. A plea deal gives everyone certainty." "Certainty." I laughed. "Rachel's parents have been waiting 7 years for certainty. Diane Foster's sister doesn't even know her death wasn't an accident. And you're offering me certainty?" I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. People turned to look. "Tell your client something for me." Clifford waited. "He can keep his plea deal. He can keep his lesser charges. He can keep whatever fantasy he's holding on to about walking free someday. Because I've got 3 years of evidence from my parents. I've got Vanessa's testimony. I've got a safety deposit box full of trophies. I've got Diane Foster's case file waiting to be reopened." I leaned down, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. "And I've got the truth. Which is more than you've ever had." I walked out. Bill followed 30 seconds later. We met at the car. "Nice speech," he said. Paused. "You okay?" "No." My hands were shaking. but I will be. The wire recording went to the DA. Clifford's attempt to negotiate a plea deal was noted. The prosecution's case got stronger. That Sunday, I went to church. Not because I felt particularly holy. Because I wanted to sit in a pew and remember what normal felt like. What community felt like. What it felt like to be part of something that wasn't a crime scene. The church was packed. Word had spread. When I walked in, heads turned. But nobody clapped this time. That diner moment had been different. This was sacred space. I slipped into a pew near the back. My parents were up front, Mom's silver hair catching the light through the stained glass. She looked back at me and winked. The service was about forgiveness. I tried to listen. I really did. But the word kept sticking in my throat. Forgiveness. For Jason? For Vanessa? For myself, for not seeing what was right in front of me? I didn't have answers. Maybe I never would. After the service, we gathered in the church basement for coffee and cookies. The same basement where I'd attended vacation Bible school as a child. The same basement where I'd had my wedding reception. The same basement where I now stood, a different woman entirely. Pastor David approached me. He was young, earnest, the kind of man who genuinely believed in redemption. "Annie, I've been praying for you." "Thank you, Pastor. If you ever want to talk about anything, my door is open." "I appreciate that." He hesitated. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook. Just something to think about. I thought about it. Then I thought about Rachel's parents. Diane's sister. The trophies in a safety deposit box. The hook felt pretty heavy. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. That afternoon, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Rachel's parents. I told them everything. The ice rope. The 7-year cover-up. The evidence that would finally bring their daughter's killer to justice. Rachel's mother cried. Rachel's father didn't say anything for a very long time. Then he said, "Thank you," in a voice that sounded like it had been broken and glued back together. The second call was to Diane Foster's sister in Michigan. Her name was Carol. She had 3 kids. She'd spent 5 years believing her sister died in a tragic accident. When I told her the truth, she didn't cry. She got quiet. Then she got angry. Then she asked what she could do to help. That was the thing about the women Jason had targeted. We were all different. But we all had the same fire in us, once someone lit the match. The safety deposit box was opened the following Tuesday. Bill went with federal agents to First Federal Bank in Millbrook. Box 237. Inside, they found exactly what Vanessa had described. A necklace with a small diamond pendant. Rachel's, according to her parents. A lock of brown hair tied with a blue ribbon. Diane's, according to her sister. A wedding ring with an inscription, "Forever, A." My wedding ring. The one I'd taken off. Jason must have taken it from my parents' house somehow. Or had a copy made. I didn't want to know. And one more item. A 4th item. A silver locket with a photograph inside. A woman I didn't recognize. Blonde. Smiling. Holding a dog. "Who is this?" I asked Bill. He paused. 2 seconds. "I don't know. But we're going to find out." 4 women. At least 4. The FBI expanded their investigation. Jason was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and enough financial crimes to fill a library. Vanessa's deal meant she'd serve time, but less. She'd testified. She'd cooperated. She'd given them the safety deposit box. The town rallied around me in ways I never expected. Casseroles appeared on my porch. Cards in my mailbox. My veterinary practice got busier than ever. People driving from 3 towns over just to have me look at their dogs and cats. Small town solidarity. It meant more than I could say. One evening, I sat on my porch with my parents. The box was still there. Empty now. The warning note still taped to the lid. 3 years, I said. You kept this secret for 3 years. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Mom said. Watching you suffer. Watching him gaslight you. There were so many times I almost told you. Why didn't you? Because if you'd known, you would have confronted him. And he would have run. And then Diane and Rachel and the other woman, whoever she is, they'd never get justice. She looked at me. I had to choose between saving my daughter's heart and saving her life. I chose her life. I twisted my bare finger. The wedding ring was evidence now. Bagged and tagged. Part of a serial killer's trophy collection. I'm not mad, I said. I thought I would be. But I'm not. You should be. Dad's voice was rough. We let you live with a monster. You let me survive a monster. There's a difference. The sun set over the farm. The dogs barked in the distance. The empty box sat between us, a reminder of everything that had been lost and everything that had been saved. What happens now? Mom asked. Now I fix the rest of the cracks. One at a time. Dad chuckled. That's my girl. The next week, I got a call from the FBI. They'd identified the woman in the locket. Her name was Susan. She disappeared 8 years ago from a town in Indiana. Her case had gone cold. Until now. Jason had been hunting women for nearly a decade. 4 confirmed victims. Maybe more. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. The house was empty now. Jason's things were boxed up, waiting for donation. His office had been cleaned out by federal agents. His cufflinks were in an evidence locker somewhere. I walked through the rooms, touching the walls, breathing the air. This house had been a prison. Now it was just a house. Mine. I went to the kitchen and looked at the fixed tile. The new grout was still visible. A scar on the floor. I'd learned to live with it. My phone buzzed. A text. This time from a number I recognized. Carol, Diane's sister, thank you for telling me. I'm coming to the trial. I want to see his face. I texted back, I'll save you a seat. The trial was 3 months away. The media was already circling. True crime podcasts. News vans. My small town had become a national story. But tonight, there was no trial. No reporters. No lawyers. Just me, my dogs, and the quiet hum of a house that was finally safe. I poured a glass of wine and walked onto the porch. The stars were out. The same stars that had been there when Rachel died. When Diane died. When Susan disappeared. I raised my glass to the sky. This is for you, I said. All of you. I'm going to make sure he never sees daylight again. Somewhere in the darkness, a dog barked. A porch light flickered. Life went on. And so would I. The trial began on a Tuesday in October. The leaves were turning red and golden brown, the kind of autumn that usually made me think of pumpkin patches and hayrides and everything good about small-town life. Now it would always remind me of the day I watched Jason Holloway face justice. The courthouse was a historic building with white columns and worn wooden benches. It had seen a century of disputes, divorces, property disagreements, the occasional assault. It had never seen anything like this. National news vans lined the street. Reporters jostled for position. True crime podcasters lurked on the sidewalk with microphones and hungry expressions. I walked past all of them without speaking. My mother held my left arm. My father held my right. Deputy Bill walked ahead of us, clearing a path through the crowd. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Rachel's parents sat in the front row. Her mother wore a blue dress, Rachel's favorite color. Her father held a photograph of his daughter in his lap, facing outward, so Jason would see her when he entered. Carol, Diane's sister, sat beside them. She'd flown in from Michigan with her 3 children, who were staying with a neighbor during the proceedings. She carried a small framed picture of Diane. She'd told me she wanted Jason to see her too. Susan's family was there. Her parents, gray-haired and stoic, had driven 8 hours from Indiana. They'd spent 8 years not knowing what happened to their daughter. They'd spent 8 years hoping she might walk through the door. Now they were here to watch her killer be unmasked. The locket was in an evidence bag somewhere, but Susan's mother wore a copy around her neck. She touched it constantly, like a prayer bead. Jason was brought in wearing a suit. Someone had paid for it. Probably Clifford, trying to make him look human. But no suit could hide what he was. He scanned the room with that old arrogance, looking for allies, finding none. When his eyes met mine, I didn't look away. Neither did he. Then he saw Rachel's parents. Diane's sister. Susan's family. The photograph of Rachel. The framed picture of Diane. The locket around Susan's mother's neck. Something shifted in his face. Not remorse. Calculation. He was still trying to figure out how to win. The prosecution laid out their case with surgical precision. The recording. Vanessa's testimony. The safety deposit box. The trophies. The financial records. The plane tickets to a non-extradition country. The scraped railing on Rachel's boat. The melted ice rope. The brake lines on Diane's car. The pattern. The patience. The predator who hunted women for their money and their lives. Vanessa testified for 2 days. She was the star witness and she knew it. She wore a plain gray dress, no jewelry, no long nails. They'd been cut short. She looked smaller than she had at those church potlucks. Smaller than the woman who'd planned my death over coffee and bank statements. The prosecution led her through the timeline. The affair. The fraud. The plans for my accident. The night Jason got drunk and bragged about Rachel. The search for Diane's obituary. The discovery of Susan's locket, which Jason kept in a locked drawer and took out sometimes, just to hold. The defense tried to destroy her. Clifford came at her with everything he had. Her affair. Her greed. Her lies. Her complicity. Her deal with the prosecution. He painted her as a scorned woman seeking revenge, a criminal trading testimony for a lighter sentence. Vanessa took every blow. Her voice shook but didn't break. When Clifford asked her why anyone should believe a word she said, she looked directly at the jury. Because I'm the only one who's telling the truth now, she said. And because I have nothing left to lose. He took everything. My career. My reputation. My self-respect. The only thing I have left is the truth. You can believe it or not. But it's all I've got. She stepped down from the stand and walked past Jason without looking at him. He stared at her with pure, undiluted hatred. For a moment, the mask slipped. The charming smile. The smooth voice. All of it vanished. What remained was something cold and reptilian. The jury saw it. Everyone saw it. Then it was my turn. I wore red. The same dress I'd worn to the arraignment. Rachel's color. I walked to the stand and swore to tell the truth. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. I'd spent 6 years being afraid of Jason Holloway. I wasn't afraid anymore. DHN walked me through my testimony. The box on my doorstep. My mother's handwriting. The recording. The flash drive. The video of my parents explaining their 3-year investigation. The moment I pressed play and heard my husband planning my death. The moment he walked through the door and saw the police. The toupee at his feet. His lunge. His threats. Then Clifford stood up for cross-examination. He straightened his jacket. Adjusted his cufflinks. A flash of memory hit me. Jason doing the same thing. The gesture was learned. Practiced. Two predators from the same pack. Ms. Parker, Clifford began. How long were you married to my client? 6 years. And in those 6 years, did you ever suspect him of anything criminal? No. Did you ever witness him being violent? No. Did you ever see any evidence of the alleged murders he's now accused of? No. So for 6 years, you lived with a man you now claim is a serial killer, and you noticed nothing. The implication hung in the air. Stupid. Blind. Complicit. I felt the old doubts creeping in. The gaslighting. The self-blame. Then I looked at Rachel's parents. Diane's sister. Susan's mother touching her locket. I noticed everything, I said. The lies. The manipulation. The way he made me doubt my own memory, my own judgment, my own sanity. I noticed the money disappearing from our accounts. I noticed the way he talked about his first wife, like she was an inconvenience he'd solved. I noticed the late nights and the secret phone calls and the feeling in my gut that something was terribly wrong. I leaned forward. What I didn't notice was that the man I married was capable of murder. Because the whole point of a predator is that you don't see the teeth until they're in your throat. Silence. The jury was staring at me. Clifford's jaw tightened. He tried another angle. You and your parents have been described as having a plan. A strategy. Some might call it a conspiracy to entrap my client. My parents spent 3 years gathering evidence of actual murders. Actual crimes. Actual bodies. If you want to call that a conspiracy, go ahead. The rest of us call it justice. Your mother was military intelligence. Your father was a sheriff. They had resources and training that ordinary citizens don't possess. Don't you think they should have gone to the authorities instead of taking matters into their own hands? They did go to the authorities. They went to Deputy Bill. And they waited because they knew Jason had connections. They knew he'd run. They knew that if they moved too soon, for murdered women would never get justice. So yes, they took matters into their own hands. And I'm grateful. Every single day. Clifford tried a few more questions. I batted them away. By the time I stepped down, the jury was nodding. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness. Evidence after evidence. The safety deposit box contents were displayed. The necklace. The lock of hair. The wedding ring. The locket. Jason's trophies, laid out for the world to see. Rachel's mother broke down when she saw the diamond pendant. Diane's sister pressed her hand to her mouth when the lock of brown hair appeared. Susan's father, a stoic man who hadn't cried in 50 years, wept when the locket was shown. The defense called Jason to testify. It was a risk, but Clifford was running out of options. Jason walked to the stand with that same old confidence. Toupee perfectly in place. Cufflinks gleaming. He looked at the jury like they were old friends. He denied everything. The recording was fabricated. Vanessa was a liar. The trophies were planted. The financial records were misinterpreted. He was a victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by my bitter, vengeful family. His voice was smooth. His answers were polished. For a moment, I felt doubt ripple through the courtroom. He was good. He'd always been good. Then DHN stood up for cross-examination. He approached the witness stand slowly, holding a photograph. Mr. Holloway, do you recognize this woman? Jason looked at the photograph. Rachel. Smiling. Holding a puppy. That's my late wife, Rachel. She died in a tragic boating accident 7 years ago. Tragic accident. Chen let the words hang. Mr. Holloway, Were you aware that the Coast Guard investigator who ruled Rachel's death accidental later recanted his conclusion? Jason's expression flickered. No. Were you aware that scrape marks were found on the boat's railing, consistent with something being tied to it? I wasn't. Were you aware that forensic analysis found traces of nylon fibers in those scrape marks, suggesting a rope made of ice that would dissolve in water, eliminating the evidence? I don't know anything about that. Of course not. Chen picked up another photograph. Diane Foster. How about this woman? Do you recognize her? Jason hesitated. A fraction of a second too long. She looks familiar. I think we met at a conference once. A conference. Ms. Foster died 5 years ago. Her car went off a bridge. The brake lines were found to have been tampered with. You were the beneficiary of her life insurance policy. $100,000. I didn't know about the insurance. Really? Because we have the paperwork. Signed by you. Notarized. Dated 3 weeks before her death. Jason's composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But the jury saw it. Mr. Holloway, how many women have you killed? Objection. Clifford was on his feet. Withdrawn, Chen said smoothly. Let me rephrase. Mr. Holloway, do you know what a trophy is? Jason straightened his cuffs. I'm not sure what you're implying. We found a safety deposit box. Box 237 at First Federal Bank in Millbrook. Inside were items belonging to 4 different women. Including a wedding ring inscribed Forever. That's your wife Annie's ring, isn't it? Jason said nothing. And a silver locket containing a photograph of Susan Morrison, who disappeared 8 years ago and whose body has never been found. Silence. Is it true, Mr. Holloway, that you kept mementos of the women you killed? Something to remember them by? Jason's hands were shaking now. Just slightly. But I saw it. The jury saw it. The whole courtroom saw it. I loved my wife, he said. His voice cracked. Not with emotion. With the strain of maintaining the lie. Which wife, Mr. Holloway? Rachel? Annie? Or one of the others you murdered? I didn't murder anyone. Then explain the locket. Explain the necklace. Explain the lock of hair. Explain the insurance policies. Explain the plane tickets to a country with no extradition treaty. Explain why every woman who married you ended up dead or nearly dead. Jason looked at the jury. Then at the judge. Then at Clifford, who was staring at the floor. Then, finally, at me. He smiled. It was the same smile he'd given me 1,000 times. Charming. Disarming. The smile that had convinced me to marry him. The smile that had convinced Rachel to marry him. Diane. Susan. All of us, falling for the same mask. You'll never prove any of it, he said quietly. We already have, Chen replied. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. It felt like 4 years. I sat in the courthouse hallway with my parents, Bill, Carol, Rachel's parents, Susan's family. Nobody spoke much. There was nothing left to say. When the verdict came in, I walked back into that courtroom and took my seat. Jason was brought in. His toupee was slightly askew. His cufflinks were gone, confiscated with his belt and shoelaces. He looked smaller now. Diminished. Like a balloon slowly deflating. The foreman stood. A woman in her 50s, the kind of no-nonsense Midwesterner who'd seen enough of life to know evil when she saw it. She unfolded the paper. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Rachel Holloway, we find the defendant guilty. Rachel's mother let out a sob. Her husband pulled her close. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Diane Foster, we find the defendant guilty. Carol pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears streaming. Silent. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Susan Morrison, we find the defendant guilty. Susan's mother clutched her locket. Her father's shoulders shook. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. I closed my eyes. The world tilted. My mother grabbed my hand. My father put his arm around me. Bill, sitting 2 rows back, nodded once. Quiet. Solid. The judge set sentencing for the following month, but everyone knew what was coming. 4 life sentences. No possibility of parole. Jason Holloway would die in prison. As the bailiffs led him away, he turned to look at me one last time. His mask was gone now. Completely. What remained was a small, bitter, defeated man. He opened his mouth to speak. Maybe to curse me. Maybe to threaten me. I didn't wait to hear it. I turned my back on him and walked out of the courtroom. The celebration at my parents' house that night was the kind of gathering that small towns do best. Half the county showed up. Marge brought 3 casseroles. Millie closed the diner early and came with pie. Pastor David said a prayer and then ate more barbecue than anyone I'd ever seen. The VFW hall donated chairs. The church ladies organized the potluck. Someone set up speakers in the backyard and played old country songs until the stars came out. I moved through the crowd like a ghost at my own party. People hugged me. Congratulated me. Thanked me. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things. But something was missing. The anger that had fueled me for months was gone, and I didn't know what to replace it with. I found myself on the porch, alone, staring at the empty box. Still there. Still holding nothing but the warning note. You okay, kiddo? Dad appeared beside me, a plate of pie in each hand. I don't know. I took the pie. Pecan. Mom's recipe. He's going to prison forever. 4 women got justice. I should be happy. But you're not. I'm something. I don't know what it is. Dad leaned against the porch railing. When I was a young deputy, I worked a case. A man killed his business partner over a poker debt. Open and shut. We had him dead to rights. Jury convicted him in 20 minutes. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I went home and sat in my car for an hour and felt nothing. Did that change? It did. Eventually. I figured out that justice isn't a feeling. It's a fact. The feeling comes later. When you're not looking for it. I took a bite of pie. It was good. Mom always made good pie. He kept trophies, I said. 4 women. 4 items. Like we were collectibles. Some people collect things. Monsters collect people. Dad's voice was rough. But he's not collecting anything anymore. And you're still here. That's not nothing. Mom appeared in the doorway, holding a fresh cup of coffee. Are you 2 hiding out here while I'm doing all the hosting? Just getting some air, Dad said. Uh-huh. She handed me the coffee. There's someone here to see you. I turned. Carol, Diane's sister, was standing at the edge of the porch. She looked exhausted and exhilarated and sad all at once. The way I felt. Can I sit? She asked. I nodded. She took the chair beside me. I wanted to thank you, she said. Before I fly home tomorrow. What you did. What your parents did. Diane can rest now. We all can. I didn't do anything except open a box. You did more than that. You stood up. You testified. You faced him. Do you know how many women never get to face the man who hurt them? I thought about it. Too many. Too many. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. A bracelet. Silver, with a tiny charm shaped like a star. This was Diane's. I want you to have it. I can't take that. You're not taking it. I'm giving it to you. So you remember. Not him. Her. All of them. I took the bracelet. The charm was cold in my palm. I closed my fingers around it. I'll remember, I said. Carol hugged me. Then she went back inside to her family. The party wound down around midnight. I helped Mom clean up while Dad and Bill put away the chairs and tables. When the last dish was washed and the last guest was gone, I stood in my parents' kitchen and looked at the crack in their floor tile. Same kitchen. Different crack. Life was full of them. You're staying here tonight, Mom said. Not a question. I have my own house. Your house is full of ghosts. Stay here. Just for tonight. I stayed. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd stared at when I was 16, dreaming about the future. The same ceiling I'd stared at when I came home from college, wondering what came next. The same ceiling I'd stared at when Jason proposed, thinking my life was finally beginning. My life had begun. And nearly ended. And now it was beginning again. I fell asleep holding Diane's bracelet. The sentencing hearing was brief. The judge, a woman with iron gray hair and a voice like a closing door, read the sentences one after another. Life without parole. 4 times. Jason stood motionless, his face blank. The charmer was gone. The manipulator was gone. All that remained was a hollow man in an orange jumpsuit. As he was led away for the last time, he didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He shuffled out of the courtroom, and the door closed behind him with a sound like finality. The victims' families gathered outside. Rachel's parents. Diane's sister. Susan's parents. We stood in a circle on the courthouse steps, the cameras clicking around us, and nobody knew what to say. Finally, Susan's mother spoke. 8 years. I waited 8 years to know what happened to my daughter. And now I know. It's terrible. But not knowing was worse. She looked at me. Thank you for giving us the truth. Rachel's father nodded. We'd like to invite you all to dinner. All of you. We want to talk about them. Not him. Them. Who they were. What they loved. The lives they lived before he took them. And so we did. That evening, we gathered at a restaurant in Rachel's hometown, an hour's drive from my own. We ordered too much food and shared too many stories. We talked about Rachel's laugh. Diane's terrible cooking. Susan's obsession with rescue dogs. We cried. We laughed more than I expected. We raised glasses to women who should still be alive. Carol gave me a photograph of Diane. Rachel's mother gave me a recipe card in Rachel's handwriting. Susan's mother gave me a copy of the same locket she wore. 4 women, she said. 4 families. But now we're one family. The family of people who loved them. I wore Diane's bracelet on my wrist and Susan's locket around my neck. I put Rachel's recipe card on my refrigerator, next to the warning note. 4 women. 4 reminders. Not of what Jason took. Of what he could never destroy. Spring came slowly that year. The farm thawed. The animals emerged from winter with mud on their paws and hunger in their bellies. My veterinary practice was busier than ever. I'd expanded the rescue shelter with the money recovered from Jason's accounts. 6 new kennels. A bigger surgery room. A part-time assistant named Lucy who loved dogs more than people and told terrible jokes that made me laugh despite myself. One afternoon, Bill stopped by the clinic. He was retired now, officially, but still showed up at the station to consult on cold cases. Old habits. He stood in my waiting room, holding a folder. I found another one, he said. Pause. 2 seconds. A woman in Tennessee. 12 years ago. Same pattern. Same insurance policy. Same accident. He was only 22. She was his first. I took the folder. Opened it. A photograph of a young woman with dark hair and a shy smile. Her name was Emily. 5, I said. 5 women. At least 5. Bill paused again. The FBI is reopening more cases. Could be more. I looked at Emily's photograph. 22 years old. The age I was when I thought I knew everything about the world. Does she have family? A mother. In Nashville. I have her phone number. I called Emily's mother that evening. Her name was Patricia. She'd spent 12 years believing her daughter fell asleep at the wheel. When I told her the truth, she didn't speak for a very long time. Then she said, I knew it. I knew something wasn't right. Nobody believed me. I believe you, I said. And the FBI believes you. And the man who did this is never getting out of prison. Patricia cried. I listened. When she was done, she asked if she could come visit. To see where Emily's killer had been caught. To meet the other families. Of course, I said. I'll save you a seat. That summer, I hosted a barbecue at the farm. Not a celebration. A reunion. All the families came. Rachel's parents. Diane's sister and her children. Susan's parents. Emily's mother. We cooked too much food and the kids played with the rescue dogs, and we didn't talk about Jason once. We talked about the women we'd lost. Their favorite songs. Their childhood pets. The ridiculous things they'd said and done that made us laugh years later. At sunset, we gathered on the porch. 5 photographs on the railing. Rachel. Diane. Susan. Emily. And a 6th frame, empty, waiting in case Bill found another one. We should do this every year, Carol said. Not for him. For them. So they're never forgotten. Everyone agreed. A new tradition. Born from tragedy. Sustained by love. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on the porch with my parents. The box was still there. Empty. Weathered now. The warning note had faded but still held. I've been thinking, Mom said, about what to do with the box. Burn it, Dad suggested. No. I picked it up. The cardboard was soft at the edges. I'm going to keep it. Why? Because it's proof. Proof that you loved me enough to fight for me. Proof that the truth comes out eventually. Proof that a box full of horrors can also be a box full of justice. I set it back down. Besides, it's a good story. Dad laughed. The best stories are true. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the church. Not for a service. Just to sit. The doors were unlocked, the way they always were in our town. I slipped into a back pew and listened to the silence. I wasn't there to pray. I wasn't there to ask for anything. I was there to be still. To breathe. To feel the weight of the past year settle onto my shoulders and then, slowly, begin to lift. The box was on the porch. The bracelet on my wrist. The locket around my neck. The recipe card on my refrigerator. The photograph of Emily in my wallet. 5 women. 5 lives. 5 stories that would never end the way they should have. But their families had answers now. Their killers were behind bars. Their names would be remembered. And I was still here. A little cracked. A little repaired. But standing. I walked out of the church and into the morning sun. My phone buzzed. A text from Bill. Found another one. Iowa. Want to drive out with me next week? I texted back, pick me up at 8. The road stretched ahead. The farm waited behind. And somewhere out there, another family was about to learn the truth. I drove home with the windows down and the radio playing old country songs. The dogs greeted me at the door. The box sat on the porch, exactly where I'd left it. I picked it up and carried it inside. Set it on the kitchen table. Opened the lid. Empty. But not really. It held 3 years of my parents' secret work. It held the truth about 4 murders and 1 attempted murder. It held the end of my marriage and the beginning of my freedom. I closed the lid. The warning note fluttered. My mother's handwriting. Neat. Precise. Faded but still legible. To cause trouble. I smiled. Mission accomplished, Mom. And somewhere, I swear, I heard Rachel laugh.